It is our very first time recording live on YouTube. I'm very excited about it because I have a special guest today who is the perfect person to ask all the questions to. I don't know a more educated person than you. So I'm going to introduce my dear lovely friend Alexandra Granato-Garcia. We met freshman year of college. We were both in the dance program. And it's interesting what a full circle moment it is because the first time our paths sort of diverged was when you got into, I forgot to turn my phone off, do not disturb, was when you got into somatics because I didn't go that way. I was doing something else. And so we're one of the many things we're going to talk about today is somatics. But before we do, I just want to give people a little more taste about you. So Alex has been one of those friends that when you reconnect, it's like no time has passed. But at the same time, the person that you are today looks entirely different than you were when we first reconnected 3 or 4 years ago. And so you've been on this transformational journey. And while you've been on this journey, you have gotten so much education about somatics and womb healing and ancestral healing and nature. And I can't even name all the things. And so I'm just really thrilled that you're here. And I want to add one other thing, and then I promise I'm going to let you talk. Another thing is when we met, it was around the time of your dad's passing. And then you started somatics, and I'm sure we'll come back to that. And then when I first started coming out as a medium and practicing, channeling with your family was a big part of my journey. Your grandmother would come through and she would be really super supportive. And so I just think it's interesting the way the universe brings all these things full circle. And here we are. So, what anything you want to add just about yourself people should know about you?
Yes, thank you so much, Amy, for having me today. I'd like to start off with just a land acknowledgement. It is a part of my practice, and so I just want to give greetings and gratitudes here from the ancestral homelands of the Gwawitikan and the Estogana tribal nations. I also acknowledge the enduring presence of the indigenous people connected to the Somisek tribes and also the people of the Yanawana, which is the land of the spirit waters, and that is now commonly called San Antonio, Texas. And San Antonio, Texas has been my home now for, oh gosh, like I don't even know, I've lost track, at over 15 years.
Mm.
But it is the birthplace of my father, and I have a lot of family here. And so, even growing up, it was always a second home for me. And it's been beautiful to return here and begin to build my own family and my life. And now, this beautiful somatic practice that has woven its way into my journey. So, thank you.
I have two questions, and the first one is one I should have asked before we hit record. What's your stop time? How long can we go?
We can do the hour.
Okay, we have an hour. Okay. Great. First real question. What is somatics?
Well, somatics is actually the body through its lived experiences. And okay, so what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about our lived experiences, we elicit a lot of feelings, sensations, emotions, some that our mind is actually cognizant of, but a lot of times there are things that it is happening so fast, especially now more than ever. We're in this like super fast paced world. And so we have kind of become less and less aware of what are those sensations. We have also been led in our Western world to really and try to intellectualize a lot of things and get into the mind and out of the body. And so, of course, as young babies, children, we naturally are more in tune with our bodies, because we're learning, right? And we're learning more from this sense of like, I don't know how to read yet. So I'm learning through my observed experiences, right? And so, to me, though, somatics is an art form. It
Mm,
is a living, breathing art form of you, and you being the masterpiece. Like, you are
mm.
also the painter and you are also the masterpiece. And so there's this like beautiful duality that happens with somatics, where you get to kind of be the observer, but also be the one actually experiencing it. And so you'll kind of find, as you begin to attune to the self, which we're going to talk a lot about today. There's a lot of different ways in which you can do this, but as you begin to attune to the self, then you begin to experience more in your life, and you get to become more aware of things that you really enjoy and other things that you'd rather leave behind, right? And so that is really what somatics is for me.
So you just said attuned to the self. And, this podcast season, I said, we're all about the self. We're going to go deep into who you are. So tell me, what do you mean by the self? What are you referencing?
So when I reference the self, I often think of it as the sacred self. And
Mm,
the sacredness of ourselves is actually our essence. So, what is the essence in which we live our human experience in this lifetime?
okay. Interesting. I was thinking this morning, I was thinking about the body. I'm working on my presentation for Astro Bash. And in that presentation, it's all about emotions. Will you experience emotions in your body? And I was thinking about you and I, because we're born 6 days apart. And so we have a lot of similar placements, and yet the aspects that we have are very different. And it creates even though we're solving for a lot of the same things, our inner world is very different. And I was thinking that natal birth chart is based on your body arrives. Your soul is wherever it is, but then when your body arrives in the physical plane, that's the stamp of the birth chart. And it was really hitting me and preparing for the conversation, that the life is so much about the body, that I'm kind of like, oh wait, what? Like, how did we lose that?
Yeah, it's so true. And you know, I realize that there's a lot of things that lead us to really get in our mind about things, right?
Mhm.
And to question or to wonder, and it's kind of what I talk about, the duality, because curiosity is a huge driving force for me in my life. I never had really called, like, named it until I
Mhm.
began to develop my own, practice and modality, where I then kind of had to think back and track, okay, what is it about the way in which I view the world, right? That's
Mhm.
something people have always commented on when they've met me, and they're like, just the way you articulate things, the way you notice things, like, how do you notice the things you notice? And I'm like, I don't know, I just do. And so I got curious to begin to see, like, could I actually track this? And so it's like curiosity happens as a thought, right? Like, in our mind, we tend to wonder, but then how do I take it from the mind and get it into the body? And so I try to always um, then allow my body to lead me through the curiosity and the experience based on how I'm feeling, the awareness of how I'm feeling. And it's been really fun to kind of test this out in nature, and just kind of see, like, where am I led? Like, you've got a path. You could go left or right. Like, what's the logical mind want to do? Maybe look at a map to see, well, what's left or what's right. What may I enjoy, or what might I not enjoy the most? And for me, it's like, okay, we're at a crossroads. How can I really tap into how I feel and where am I led? Like, where am I energetically being pulled? And what's waiting for me there can be even greater than something I could ever imagine. Um, and so that's kind of where getting back into the body and listening, being present in the now and the moment, and not really thinking about future, past, what's next, but really just in that moment now. Okay, which way do I want to go?
Mhm.
And then kind of think about it once I get there, like, what did this mean for me? Like, because as we know, nothing's a coincidence. Like, we are divinely led in this path, in this great web of life. And one of my greatest, like, things to do is to connect those dots of, like, even how you and I are sitting here today, right? Like, what a wild path we've
Yeah.
taken if we really stop to think about it.
Mhm.
And so it's so cool. I could do it all day.
So you said several things that are worth commenting on, but we have so much to talk about. I want to reflect back that you were saying getting out of the mind, being in the body, being present. How do you get people to do that? Is that how you help people? Like how do you yeah.
I start every session with walking.
Hmm.
Walking the space. I do my experiences in person and I do them virtually. And so I feel that it works. Movement is a huge part of my somatic modality. Not all somatic modalities use movement, but that is, as a dancer and as a mover my entire life. And then through, of course, East West Shin Somatics, which is my initial formal somatic training program. It is rooted in a lot of dance movement therapy, and so movement's always been an element that I bring in to really any space I'm in. So I begin with walking. I have had the number of times I've had people say, well, good luck with that. I can't quiet my mind. I don't know how to meditate. Like, and I just smile and I say, we're going to approach this from a beginner's mind. So I want you to just like leave expectations aside, and we're going to set an intention for our time together today. And we're going to really allow the body to lead the way. And I hope you're ready for an element of surprise, because there's always something beautiful at the end of a session waiting. Even if what you have to experience is a memory that's maybe not as pleasant, guess what? We continue to move through it. We don't sit in the story. There's no reason to sit in the story. So we acknowledge it with love and compassion and grace for the self, the people involved, the situation, and we continue to move. And so I really use somatic movement to help people continue to move into the more of the sensations that they want to be experiencing, and that's kind of where we migrate to, and that is where the magic really begins to happen.
So speaking of the magic, it feels to me that every time we catch up and I hear about what you're doing, it's something different. Like sometimes we're talking about ancestral healing, releasing emotional trauma from the body, or we're talking about womb work. You know, your work goes in so many different directions. So, what is your broad goal in your work? And I kind of want you to answer that in terms of both the way that you live your life, but also in terms of the way that you work with people one on one.
Yeah, so the broad goal is really to create a sacred space for exploration.
Mm,
And within that space of exploration, it becomes this journey of discovery and this journey of remembrance. And so our bodies have anything we could ever need in this lifetime. Our body knows and has the answer. But to access that information and knowledge, there is thousands, 10,000s of ways, right? And so I do have a lot of modalities and information and
It's cutting out.
in that given time, I could bring that into the session. But it's really for me, like the thing is knowing that you're being held and you're being seen and you're being lovingly supported in the most like gentle, nurturing way. I always tell people I have like grandmother energy. Like think of grandmother Willow.
You
Like
totally do.
I am a tree, and I am like the
Yeah.
Mexican grandma that's like, you come to her house, she's never gonna turn you away, and she's like, okay, what do you need? Like, what do you need? And I, if I don't have it, I'll find it, right?
Hmm.
And so I really feel like it is, you know, you're just at this point where you're like, there's something more for me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my career life path. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's just I'm not feeling like myself, or I recognize I lost myself. That's one part that led me personally back to this work in a deeper intentional way. And so it's like, great, like let's experience have an experience together. For me it's really curating somatic experiences that have this sacred space set aside for that discovery and that remembrance. And the way in which we go about it is ever changing. And I think it, for me, it always will be. But I can guarantee you that movement is 100% going to always be a part of the experience.
Yeah. Well, and you said sacred space several times, and because I know you, I know that for you that means nature. So talk to me about, with your journey back to somatics, has it over did that bring you to nature? Were you already in nature? Talk to me about your relationship with nature and how that relates to somatics.
Yeah, so my relationship with nature has existed my entire life. I grew up like in a border town with beautiful natural springs running through it. We have one of the largest lakes in Texas. And I was fortunate that my parents had property out there. And then my dad also had a family friend that had a beautiful ranch with like a creek running through it. And, my parents worked a lot, like most of our parents, worked out of the house. And so for me, anytime, especially with my dad, because he loved nature, so he definitely passed that on to us. But anytime we spent time with him, we were pretty much outside.
Mm,
And with my mom, anytime we were home from school, like be outside. Like she wanted us outside. She
mm,
knew enough to know like there's a lot you can do. Like, don't ever say you're bored. There's plenty of things to like figure out and do. And so we had a beautiful backyard with gorgeous pecan trees and shade. And we would experience the monarch migration because we were on the Texas Mexico border. And so the monarch is has always been like this totem animal for me. You
mhm,
can see it's a big part of my logo. And I just remember as a child like being so awestruck at this event, even though I didn't know the intricacies of it like I do now. They would cover our trees where like literally it was like you couldn't even see the foliage anymore. It was just like one giant butterfly. And the wildlife biologists would actually come from Texas Parks and Wildlife, and they would like do data and science. And so that was kind of cool to watch. And um and then I've always loved water, I think because of, now I know with my ancestral background, um, some of my ancestors grew up around water, and that was, the sea and the ocean was really important to them. Um, but also in Texas, we are blessed with a lot of different bodies of water. We have lakes, we have fresh water, we have salt water. And so I always just grew up in nature, and my dad always made it a point to teach us about life through nature. And so most of the, life lessons you learn from your parents, patience, forgiveness, endurance,
mhm.
resilience, like that was all, whether it was like we're fishing, whether it was survival techniques. I mean, my dad wanted us to be able to not have to really depend on anyone and to be self sufficient if it came down to it, that we could survive and that we had the knowledge and the skills. And I'm an intrinsic learner. Like, I got to get my hands in there. You can tell me all day, but it's like I've really got to do it for myself. And so that was most of my childhood, was just like being in nature, piddling with things, creating things, seeing how life worked. And then that's really just translated into my adult life now.
Well, how does that I mean, how does that affect your somatic practice? And I'm gonna put a question in the chat because with the butterflies, I was curious if you would you call it a spirit animal or just something that's important to you?
For me, it's my own personal animal totem, spirit animal, my own medicine that I carry. And I know that transformation is a big part of my work in this lifetime. Not only for me to lead myself through transformation, but also to be that way shower for others because I've gone first. So in human design, I'm a 3-5, and my 3 line is really having to just do it on my own, and
Mhm.
you learn the hard way a lot of times, but it's
Yeah.
like that's just how I'm designed. And so I've really just embraced that in the things that have felt hard, and the things that have felt messy, and the things that have felt dark and lonely at times. It's like I know there's a light, and that light is within me, and that light is going to forever burn. And so this is kind of where the somatic part comes in, is where I am aware of my essence, that secret self. um, and I know that no matter what, that will always be there, because nobody can take that away. And we all have it, but throughout our life it gets dimmed, we get projected on, and we get told like we can't do that or we can't be that. And so it's just like if you watched a flame in the wind, and the way it billows, and moves with the air. Or sometimes how like water kind of starts to put out the flame, but then it doesn't fully go out and it reignites, right? And so um, I look at things a lot through like this archetypal lens. It's just kind of how I'm wired, where I look at like what are the things present in my life or in this experience, and what can I learn from that. So whether it's like it was a dark, stormy day, and our truck got stuck in the mud, and we didn't have cell phone service, and we only had a gallon of water, right? And so it's like I can use that experience to say, okay, what is this teaching me?
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that's where, from a somatic perspective, looking at those archetypes of nature that are out there in nature and
Mhm.
accessible to all of us for free. We can walk out the
Yes.
door at any time and just like literally walk out and be still enough to notice what is the first thing that calls my attention. Is it a sound? Is it a feeling? Do I feel some airbrush against my skin? Do I feel some sweat begin to bead on my body from the hot sun? Do I hear blue jays squawking? I have a lot of blue jays right outside my door, so I always
Yeah.
hear them. Um, or is it something like runs across, like a squirrel or a cat? So that's like the easiest way to start. And just notice, like, what calls my attention? And I wonder what could that offer me? And
Yeah.
while now we have Google and our phone at our fingertips, where we could look online and see, well, what does this mean? I always discern and look inside. What does this mean to me? How does this make me feel? What does it make me think of? Maybe, like for instance, cardinals. I see a cardinal, I'm like, hey, dad, I see you.
Yeah.
He always said I would be a cardinal. You know, that was just we always candidly talked about like death, and in my family at least, like there wasn't really like a fear around it. It was like, that's a part of life, and here's what my wishes are, and here's how you're gonna know that like I'm always there. And so, I see a cardinal, I automatically think of my dad. And then I think, oh, what would my dad think in this moment? Or what would he think about this thing? And so that's kind of how I somatically then begin to have this language and this conversation with the external world outside of me and that greater universal energy and that great web of life that we're all interconnected to.
Yeah. So you've said a lot of things that have made me create two hypotheses or two thoughts. And I want you to tell me whether or not they're true. And if they're not true, I want you to correct it. One thing is, I think that you are saying that you cannot be in touch with your sacred self if you're not in touch with your body.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Are you also saying that you cannot be your best self, your highest self, without being in touch with your body?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. That's
Yeah,
what,
because the body is our vessel in this lifetime.
yeah.
And it is our own terrain that we need to nurture and that we need to clean up at times and that we need to, pour into. And for most people, it's kind of the last thing they think about,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? In more ways than one. And this is like outside of appearance, which is normally the one way we jump to conclusions
Right.
to think about ourselves because of whatever social media says we should be or
Right.
society says, right? um and I've just always had this like deep appreciation for my body. And I didn't realize like that's rare.
Yeah.
That's really
That's
rare.
very rare. Yeah.
I actually had a cousin tell me, like, she was like, I've always just admired how you've just accepted and loved your body for like what it is. She's like, I just can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, sure you can. Spend some time with me and you can. But it's not easy work. And
Yeah.
that's the other thing I want to say. Like, this is a lifelong journey. Like, people ask me, okay, well, how many sessions am I going to need? And that's going to be gone. And I'm like, well, I don't really know because your body has the answer, right? But what we do each time you have these experiences, and when you find the parts of what really resonates for you, that then you begin to lead yourself through it. These practices aren't anything crazy that you couldn't lead yourself through, but it's always nice to know that there's somebody there and space is being held and you don't have to hold it all, because that's also how we build capacity. You know, we have to build our capacity through this work. We titrate our way in, and the body always shows us
Capacity for what?
capacity for the experience. So, like, we're
Oh,
tapping,
of just staying in your body rather
yeah,
than
staying in the body
disassociating. Okay.
when like things get uncomfortable, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Or also that things are really exciting. I mean, how much has something that's like really exhilarating, you have that like crash after, right? When you come down
Right.
off of it. And so it's like, how do we kind of build the capacity to stay in the body and to really wholeheartedly like have those experiences and hold them and um, allow them to create even more of our essence, right? Like, because I feel like that's what begins to then really amplify our essence is when we're connected in the body in that way, then we're able to carry it on, and then we're able to hold more, we're able to experience more. And I mean, life just gets better and better at that point, because you get to really, you're like really living your fullest expression, your fullest self, right? Because we all are inherently whole. We just lose those parts of ourselves along the way of life. And sometimes we're not taught, like, well, how do I still carry that along in a way where it's not weighing me down anymore? How do I shift the relationship with that part, that feeling or the emotion, to where now it can have a seat at the table and it doesn't have to be so loud, because it's being heard, it's being seen.
Mhm.
And that all ties back into capacity building, but you don't do that overnight, right? And so we just know, like, I view life as a spiral and as a circle, not in this like linear way of like, I'm climbing this ladder or I need to be here by a certain time, but honoring that in those cycles and in those seasons, just like nature, this is a lot of indigenous teaching talks about the medicine wheel or the beauty way path is really about that living in the essence and in those moments in the present in the now, and then take kind of you catalog those experiences, and then that builds that essence from the way in which you move and do and feel and be in the world.
Mm. So one of the things that I know about the body with all my, emotional obsessions is that that emotional energy can get kind of trapped or stuck in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very common. Like women, a lot of times carry um, stuck emotions or emotions that they haven't released in their hips and in their breasts. And so if something happens where they have a big hip release, or maybe there's like a breast massage or something, all of a sudden there's just this emotional response that women can be like, what just happened? They don't know where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, because I know you do ancestral work with somatics, and so I'm wondering, is that the way that ancestral energy shows up, or how does ancestral work come into play?
So ancestral work comes in a few different ways, but the biggest ways for me personally is as I've been on this journey of like living my highest expression, is like I wanted to get back to what were those ways of my ancestors? How did
Mm,
they live their life? How am I living my life differently? And what are those things that kind of like fell off along the way that need to kind of be reintegrated into my life? Because guess what? Epigenetically, that's in our DNA.
right.
And a lot of times it lays dormant or it becomes activated with a particular situation. And this also goes for ancestral traumas. This also goes for patterns in your life, because with somatics, you do a lot of tracking. And through the tracking of the feelings, sensations, activations, events, you then begin to look at that data and say, okay, I'm noticing this pattern here. Then we can get a little bit more curious about, okay, where is that pattern coming from? Because we're all born with subconscious beliefs and patterning that isn't necessarily ours, but becomes ours in this lifetime when it becomes activated.
Yeah.
And that's when then you begin to pay attention and say, why do you keep attracting these kind of people? Or this situation, like,
Yeah.
here
Here
I
I am
am
again.
again, having to learn this lesson. But
Yeah.
this time, guess what? You've built your capacity, and what happens? You move through it a lot quicker because you begin to recognize. And it's like each time you do it, you become smarter about it, really, because your body's knows, okay, last time this happened, we did this and this, and now we're adding this layer. And so you continue to like tease it out until then you prepare the body to actually rewire it. So it's
Mm,
not like you're going to be like, oh, I'm aware of this pattern and I'm going to rewire it tomorrow and then I'm
right.
going to dust my hands and it's gone.
Yeah.
You've got to build the awareness and you've got to prime the nervous system through titration, through little baby micro shifts in movements. And then that's how you then begin to create that change. So, like for instance, for
I
me,
mean, I will tell you, when
mhm,
people first experience grief, almost everybody thinks they're going to die. If they haven't had to experience big emotion and hold it for an extended period of time, I mean, grief will come in and kick your butt. And they're literally, it's if I'm dealing with a person with grief, I have to first tell them, you're not going to die. Like this part, it feels terrible Amen. But it's not actually going to kill you. And
Mhm.
it's because we don't have that capacity built up.
Right. Well, and I think that's why it's important that you work with people that you feel safe with and that
Oh,
you
yeah.
also trust, right? Because knowing that you are there and you are skilled in certain ways to help hold that, then it doesn't have to feel so heavy. You're not taking it on as your own. You,
Right.
as a practitioner, are able to discern what's yours and what's not yours, right? But being in that container of being like, this is not something I can move through by myself. And when you think back to, I know you have your background in anthropology, like I love culture. And of course, like my indigenous roots have really become illuminated in the past 2 years and is a big part of the way I do my life. But it was all about community. There was no like I and then you, it was
Hmm.
we. And so I think we're getting back to those ways now as a society, realizing like we can't do it all. We need to ask for help. Healing happens in community, and healing also happens intergenerationally. So, like, kind of going back to the ancestral work, anything that you do to elevate yourself also elevates your lineages. Those blessings get passed back. And now, guess what? You have more spiritual support that you can tap into, that you can call upon. And they also get passed forward to other generations. And, especially children are really receptive to this naturally because divine will hasn't quite kicked in yet. So they're still able to really receive the
Mm.
fullness of the work that you're doing. So, like as parents or caregivers or role models or mentors, we are able to create those changes for them. And then they don't have to be the one to do that work. They'll have different assignments. We know that, there are different experiences they'll have, but at least we can help them be even more prepared by the healing that we do sets them up more for success in being able to handle whatever cards they're going to be dealt, um, and hopefully be led to the right people and support, to help move them through it because we all need that. I mean, even for me, like I have a lot of different people I can call upon, based on what my needs are. And that's the beautiful thing is that nobody does things exactly the same way. And so you kind of know like who's in my network, who's that person I can call upon. Or if not, they're going to know somebody, right? Because of our interconnectedness, they're going to know somebody. And, that's how we begin to create change in the body through the nervous system at a microcellular level, is all through the water within our body. And
Mm.
so that's why water is like the first element I always introduce people to in my somatic work, is intentionally beginning to work with water and recognizing its essence and its potency. I mean, water is the most powerful element out of the five. And there's a lot of beautiful teachings from various cultures around the world about how they honor water and the deities and the gods of water, or the rituals and the practices. So I love even looking at cultures outside of myself because when you think about it, we are all essentially one. So somewhere in there, some of this resonates. And I love just learning about how can I continue to commune with the things in my life that sometimes we take for granted in a really intentional way. And how does giving it that time and that attention then increase my own vitality and my own essence and vibrancy, in the way I move and do life.
Mm. Well, I had a question and we came far away from it, so I don't want to. I'm going to go there. So I was thinking about, we were talking about ancestors and also the capacity to hold feelings, and I was thinking about my experience both as a medium and then when I've had sessions with John Moore doing family constellations. So in family constellations, you sit on something and you don't know what it is, but you feel the feelings of that energy. So, and I had a session where um, I was standing on a loved one's representation, and this person had lost a child, and I could feel their devastation, their depression. I mean, I knew it wasn't mine, but it felt the same way it would feel if it was mine. So that's family constellations, and then with mediumship, it's very similar. If someone comes through and they give me this sensation, like I'm swallowing weird and it's like I have mucus in my throat. I don't actually have mucus in my throat and I know it's not mine, but I'm feeling it, yet I'm able to observe it. It's a weird sort of I'm feeling it enough to know what it is, but I'm not actually feeling it.
Mhm.
Especially with pain, like people that have had like a gunshot or a surgery that didn't go well, I know I'm in pain, but I'm not actually feeling it. So I'm curious with ancestral work and somatics, does it ever take on that somatic experience for you, or have you just worked ancestrally just in developing your knowledge and your practices?
I would say that it's both. And one of the biggest things that I do pretty close to the beginning of a session is I always have people generate their own self sourced power and energy. And we reintegrate that into the body as a baseline so that then as we move through the experience or the practices, because we could be in a group or we could just be like you and I, we're better able to discern what is ours and what is not ours. Because you and I have better discernment of that because of the spiritual work we've done, the energetic work we've done. But most people that come into my world, like half the time, they're like on a leap of faith of like, I don't know, I just know I need to do this. And the beautiful thing is, like, they learn with me through the actual experience. So it's funny you say that because I when I first started my business, I was like, okay, well, I could talk about ancestral and I could have all these master classes, right? But that didn't, like, it never, it was an initial idea, but it never took off for me because I was like, I know I'm a communicator and I'm a teacher of this, but that doesn't feel right for me. And I think because I'm somebody who has to learn through experience, I'm
Mhm.
like, everything I do, you're just going to come for an experience with me. And the
Yeah.
most beautiful thing is because you are dropped in and you are aware of your body when you work with me, you're actually absorbing more of the knowledge that I'm teaching. Your body's absorbing it for sure. The mind, maybe yes or no. And it's going to continue to meld and come to your awareness like in due time. And you'll journal and you'll notice. But it's really cool to be able to like teach these things through an actual lived experience, which is
Mhm.
what somatics is. But I
Right.
know
You're
there's a lot of
experiencing.
somatics out there that you're not like there's not that bridge,
Okay.
and especially now it's kind of a buzzword, right? But when we look at cultures and we look at indigenous cultures specifically, like somatic was their way of life. Like they didn't really do anything without being fully in tune of their bodies and the external environment and energies and elements that were guiding every decision that they made. Whereas now we're having to relearn that. We know it, our bodies know it and have the knowledge, but we're having to kind of retrain ourselves on seeking the knowledge or seeking the effect that we want to have and
Right.
finding that through the body.
A minute ago you said that the first thing you do in a session is, did you say connect with, but self-sourced power.
Hmm.
I don't think I've heard you say that phrase before. So I'm very curious, if our power wasn't self-sourced, where were we getting it? What do you
Well,
mean by that?
well, I think it's about a lot of times how we it's like actually creating and internalizing, whereas most of the time we're like looking for the answer or the thing outside of ourselves. And so
Mm,
then we begin to like lose that clarity and that judgment of like, where is this coming from? What is it? Is it ours? And so I use the breath in an intentional way of tracking the breath through the body and making sure that it goes through all of our centers, because what is somatics is working with the nervous system. What is the nervous system? Working with the systems of the body. So it's a very like systematic approach. um but it's like you don't have to be aware of all that. I could tell you if you wanted. Like I always ask clients, are you scientific, are you spiritual, are you a mix of both, like what do you prefer? And then kind of based on what is more comfortable or kind of their default, that's more of the language that I use. And then we begin to create this new language as they begin to realize like some people are very spiritual and they're like, of course I'm an energetic being. And then other people are like, I'm not spiritual at all, because we tie spirituality with religion. And there's a lot of reasons why people may have moved away from that over time. And then it's like, oh, through the science and through nature, we can understand we are energy, we are matter. Like the sun is energy. We need the sun needs us, right? And so then that's kind of where we then begin to like connect all the dots back into that system of being like, okay, we're going to self source our own energy through our body, run it through so that we can really discern what is our baseline right now in this moment. And then
mm,
what is it that we move through that then we're able to know, okay, this is coming up for me, but I'm not really sure where it's coming from. Then that could be something karmic, that could be something ancestral. And so then that's where you kind of begin to discern like, did I actually have an experience in this lifetime where I had this, or where is it coming from? And really, with somatics, to be honest, story doesn't matter. Our
yeah.
ego wants the story.
Yes.
And so
Same thing with emotional releasing.
exactly.
It's just,
Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
but why is it there? Oh, we need to fix it. No, we don't. We're just going to acknowledge it's there. We're going to give it that awareness in that space, and we're going to continue to move.
Mhm.
So it's a beautiful. It really is this dance of like meaning making and not meaning making, being
Right.
in the honoring the journey, and then knowing that we can move through that and we don't have to lose a part of it. Honoring the story while also losing parts of the not losing parts of the story, but changing the relationship that the story has over us, right? And so, yeah, and that's what I tell people. Like, you don't even have to know why you're sad. We're just gonna acknowledge that you're sad, and we're gonna continue to move, and we're gonna create a shift to where then you can feel, the swing emotion of that, and be able to be in that flow zone of where I can be sad and I can allow myself to be sad, because it is important to also like allow the space for that. But
Mhm.
then I can experience my joy again right away. And I can do that through these different ways that I've built within myself of how I access that. Because we all access, those feelings and emotions very differently, for each of us, because all of our bodies are unique.
Yeah, the attachment to story is such a big thing with, our bodies are so smart. They know how to take care of us. We don't have to tell it to breathe. We don't have to tell it to heal itself when we get a cut, right? Our bodies, I believe, are also designed to release emotion naturally. Like, we're stuck emotion is a thing that we made up, if
Hmm.
we're designed to do it. But what I notice happens when I'm working with someone with emotional releasing techniques is they'll start to release the sadness or the grief. And the second it releases, their brain wants to go, but the story. And then they get right back into it.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel safe. But they
Yeah.
haven't built that capacity in the body to not feel the chaos or the depression or the grief or the
Yeah.
sadness. They haven't built the capacity to feel joy, to feel pure joy, or to feel peace. So we have to do that through these experiences, and we have to build up to it, to where then their default is no longer the depression or the sadness. Their default is joy and divine love
Yeah.
and peace, right? And I think a lot of times why we cut that emotion off is because we've been taught that we can't feel. I mean, or how many times do people try to say, "Oh, you're not sad," and it's like, "Don't tell me how I feel." Like, and I think about this a lot, like being a parent and
Oh yeah.
the awareness we have now compared to like what our parents did and what they experienced from their parents and so on. We have a lot more information now, right? And so I can't help but just like marvel at my child losing their mind and knowing that like it is fully safe and okay to do that. And when you're ready, we're going to talk about it and we're going to like, you know, get what we need to from that situation. And next time, like, it may not be as big of a deal as it was at one time, but it's a constant work in progress, right? And so,
Yeah, I think a lot of our generation doesn't have the same emotional somatic awareness that you and I have. So we took our daughters to a water park, and my youngest, she's little. A, she's only 5, but B, she's little for a 5-year-old. And she really wanted to do this big slide thing. And of course, we're on the stairs, and she says, "I don't want to do it." And I said, "Yes, you do. You already decided that you do. You're feeling scared. It's okay that you're scared, but you already decided that you want to do it. So we're going to do it anyway. Like, we're up here, we're doing it." And of course, she was scared, and then she had a great time. And so I think it's our generation is so big on identifying the emotion for them and saying, "Oh, you're scared." But then we want to fix it
mhm,
rather than teaching them, "This is what scared feels like. And you already decided you're doing this. So we're going to do it and hold the fear."
yeah.
You
And it's
know?
kind of like pushing to that edge, right? And
Yeah.
in that edge is where the growth really happens. But that edge can be really comfortable and uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
based on your life experiences of how you were like what was modeled or how you were held in that edge before, then you're adding more layers of, things you have to work through for it. So for sure.
Yeah. I keep thinking about this one memory I have that I'm going to share, and then I'll let you wrap up. I had one of my favorite spiritual experiences I've ever had was in the pyramid at Unity Houston. And we had some people in town from the Oneness University in India. And we were all wearing white. There's a lot of custom that I am not actually intimately aware of. But we were sitting in a circle and we were all holding hands, and we were just breathing at the same time. Inhale and exhale at the same time. And before you knew it, everybody was either sobbing, crying, or blissfully laughing. And you could not stop it. And I thank God I was on the blissful laugh side. I could not stop it, and I felt so terrible. The woman next to me was just sobbing. But it's like that breath of life holds that naturally, and if we were just breathing. And it makes me think to something you said earlier about being present. It's like when we're not present, that's when those emotions get stuck. They would we would hold it naturally and release it naturally if we were with it, you know?
Right. Right. But a
Yeah,
lot of times we just kind of escape it because it feels
sure.
uncomfortable. And, we weren't really shown different ways of handling that. So, yeah. And then consider that over your lifetime and how that builds up. I mean,
Yeah,
that's how essentially we manifest disease within our bodies because that's when we start to pay attention, when our bodies literally like, I cannot anymore, or this pain is too much, or I can't move this part of my body anymore. And it's like, okay, as we know, there's like archetypes and ties to elements within our body in different organs and places and spaces. And there is different emotions that are tied to certain diseases or pains in the body. And so it's like those are just ways of better understanding what might be there and what is it that I need to help me to be able to alchemize that and move through it, like. And as we move through it, then that's essentially how we create change. And if you look at nature, that it does that naturally on its own. It's sad that natural disasters happen, but you think about a lot of times the regeneration that comes through that, right? And seasonally, there's different seasons that happen and certain processes that take place as a way of stripping away, pruning, regenerating. And so you were talking about the essentially creating coherence in that experience of using the breath to create this coherence and this a tuning fork essentially that everybody was tapped into the same frequency
Mhm.
at the same time in that present moment. And the way in which people's bodies responded is exactly what their tolerance was to experience that, unified breath. Um,
Yeah.
and the breath is really what guides a lot of somatic experiences. I fall into the breath of the clients that I work with first. And that helps me kind of how you do in mediumship, where like they're giving you that information and then you're able to kind of discern. So I'm able to kind of discern where my client is at, what they're feeling in their body. I get a better awareness. And then I then create the shift. And through the somatic practices we do, then they're attuned to my breath, and that's how then we begin to create that tolerance and we create that shift. It's
Mm.
really cool. And most people aren't even like fully aware, or they'll at the end of the session they're like, wow, what was that? Like, I feel so peaceful. I feel so expansive, where I felt so heavy when I first came here. And it's like, that's how we do it, is we find a new frequency to attune to. And what is the best frequency we can attune to is to step outside and to use nature's frequency and use the heartbeat of nature, and use what's around us through the elements or the animals or the objects in nature, and use those to play with attuning to those different frequencies and see how do they feel for us, right?
Yeah.
Because for all of us they'll feel a little different.
So that the hour's wrapping up. I'm going to invite everybody that's watching live, if they have a question, to go ahead and
Mm-hmm.
put it in the chat. Um, Alex, what do you want to leave us with? Anything you want to share that I haven't asked you? I have 4 or 5 more topics that I wrote down that I knew we just wouldn't get to all of them. So if there's anything else that you want to share, of course, how do people find you? But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just would love to know what your big takeaway was for today. As I know that it's like nothing that I'm saying is like news, but yet it's news at the same time, because we've been so tapped out of like the awareness. And so I really just want to invite everybody to have a sense of curiosity, and to see how can my inquiry or my curiosity lead me to discovering something new about myself, and in the most gentle and loving way. And through that, just noticing what then begins to be the next thing that creates that curiosity, and then the next thing, and that's kind of how this work goes. So for me, I'm active on Instagram, is the platform I'm most active on right now. I do have a website, fluturacreative.com. I am starting to blog more, and will be doing more of that, because it's a great outlet for me to just express the way I view the world, and have people get a different glimpse into my world. Right now, the way of entry into working together is a 90-minute discovery session. It is a very personalized experience for you. And it is a beautiful blend of the multimodality somatic approach that I've been trained in, along with the indigenous practices that um, I have picked up in just reconnecting with my indigenous um, roots and the path, the medicine path that I'm on. And the feedback has been extraordinary. People have just given me beautiful reflections of like, wow, I've never really treated myself so special and in this way. It's just a really special time together. And those experiences are also available for small groups. If you run a group or have a community and want to experience this in community with other people, it also works very well that way. And then from there, we're better able to discern what your needs may be and how I can best support you in the long term. So,
Awesome. Thank you, Alex, so much for being here. We'll see if we have to do a part 2 to get all these other bullet points I had written down.
I know there's
Yeah.
so much to talk about.
Yes. Well, have a good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you're able to take a minute to just get inside your body, experience whatever it is that you're experiencing. Story doesn't matter for today. And if it does, that's fine too. But just, yeah. All right, loves. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.